hopefully this should be a useful exercise in terms of getting to grips with understanding how Google spreadsheets work and how they can be a fantastic tool for sort of the initial cleaning and analysis stage of your data. First thing I'm going to do this is some data on hospitals and healthcare in Catalonia. This is something we're going to work with later on. So what I'm going to do is just, if you see this link in the URL there. No? Yeah, okay, that's cool. I will see if I can make that bigger. If you can make that out. So that if you go to that link, that will ask you to download an XLS file, a spreadsheet file. So if you just save that, that's something we're going to use a little bit later. If anyone, just put your hand up if you have any problems with saving that, but it should be straightforward. Datos XLS.
Can you put up the URL again?
Yeah. Are we all good on this, guys?
Es Datos XLS.
Just save the file and make a note of where you've saved it.
¿Todas la tenemos? ¿Alguien no la tiene? Okay, you're good to go.
Great. Okay, guys. So before we start doing some work with that file, I don't know what different levels of sort of skill you guys have with Excel or any spreadsheets. If anyone can put their hand up if they've not really used a spreadsheet tool before or not for a long time. Okay, that's cool. So I'm going to start with just some of the very basic functions in a spreadsheet. Just to give you some background, Google Spreadsheets is obviously Google's free online version, basically, of Microsoft Excel. There are some minor differences between the two. If you're a proper sort of financial analyst, you'd probably want to use Excel, but for 99% of the things a data journalist will do, Google Spreadsheets are fine. One of the differences actually is that any function, any formula that I write in this is whether you're accessing it from Barcelona or from England or from Africa, it will be in English. Whereas in Microsoft Excel, there are the functions, the formula are actually in your local language. So there will be some times when I will just run something past Ma, and Ma will tell you the equivalent term. But these are very short little words I'll be using, so they should be, the fact that they're in English shouldn't necessarily be a problem. So yeah, very simple things first. The first thing you might want to do with some data is calculate a total. So what I've taken just a little snapshot, a small part of the hospital data that I just ask you guys to download. So what I'm going to do here is, if I want to find out the total number, each of these we have the hospital region on the left, and in this column here we have the number of people attending that hospital below 15 years old. So what I'm going to do is, if I want to find out the total of whatever is in this column, and the first thing to note is you always start with equals sign. anything you type in a cell to get a number out, you start with equals. So to add the total, I then go sum, and then I open a bracket and I highlight all of this, and that gives me the total. That's the total of everything in that row. So again, for those of you who've used spreadsheets, I'm sure that's extremely easy. For those of you who haven't, that's just an idea of any analysis I'm going to carry out. It's going to be in that kind of equals something, and then you select the data that you're analyzing.
Excuse me, is there a chance you can make it any bigger?
Yep, I will.
Mientras tanto, deciros que cuando el Excel está en español, tratando de decir español en vez de castellano, porque creo que no tiene Excel en catalán, no lo sé, ya veremos si alguien sabe Excel en catalán, es igual suma, o sea, la fórmula es suma en vez de sum, que es lo que está poniendo ahora.
So yeah, just again, that's any analysis, any cleaning, anything I carry out on this data at all, it'll be equals and then the term and then select the data that I'm looking at. So again, just to give you another example, if I wanted to work out the average in that column, it is simply this, and you see there it says there's a decimal, it's 0.8. You can choose. I can have that to say 5 decimals or 1, or I can even have it rounded less than that. Worth bearing in mind, though, this is an important little mathematical sort of lesson as well as related to spreadsheets. The average there is the mean, so that is just the total divided by the number of items. Quite often, as a data journalist, you'll want the median instead, which is the value in the middle. So if you, for example, if you're looking at, say, earnings of a group of maybe 100 people, and say 2 people earn maybe 100,000 euros, but the rest of them, everyone earns around, say, 25,000 euros. If you calculate the mean, it will be skewed upwards by those values at the top, whereas the median picks the middle value. So it's in effect, when you're dealing with a lot of data, the median is a more accurate representation of the average of a group of figures. So in this case, just to give you an example of how that works, if this figure, if I change that to 45,000, just watch what happens to the average here. It goes up to 17,000, whereas it was 2,200. But if I make this the median now, you'll see that whether that value is 450,000 or 466 makes a much less difference on this figure. So that's just to illustrate that when you're dealing with large data sets, the median, if you talk about the average and you're using an average in the story, the journalism that you're writing, it's always better to use the median.
Para que lo sepáis en español, en vez de media, no es media, la fórmula es promedio, y la median es el mediana. No sé hasta qué punto estáis acostumbrados a utilizar la mediana, porque casi no se utiliza en los medios, pero como él ha dicho, es muchísimo más justo muchas veces utilizar la mediana. ¿Habéis entendido todos la diferencia entre media y mediana? ¿Alguien no la ha entendido? Que levante la mano. Can you explain again the difference between average and median? So,
I mean, technically, and the average could be either of these, but just in terms of what we're talking about here, when I said equals average, it adds up all those numbers and divides by how many there are. The median, it ranks all those numbers and it gives you the middle one. So yeah, just again, in terms of what that actually means is that if you've got some very, very low or very, very high values that are sort of they're anomalies, they don't fit with the rest of your data, then the mean, the average, will be skewed towards the very low values or towards the very high values, whereas the median, it doesn't matter if you've got some, say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 100, it will just go for the middle one. So if that makes sense, if anyone wants to chat to me afterwards as well, if they can't get their head around that's absolutely fine. So another thing that I'll go on, again, this is quite a fairly simple tool. If I just want to know how many numbers are there. I say count, and it tells me there are 30. If for some reason, if this data was not as neat, not as clean as this, if this, for example, had some letters, then when you say count, it only counts the numbers. But if I said count A, it counts everything. So again, just to go through that again, if you've got a list that contains numbers and text, and you want to see how many things are in there, then if you just want to see how many of anything, how much information you've got, you use count and then letter A. If you only want to look at the numbers, it is just count. Right, so I'll now go into some very slightly more advanced stuff. Let's say I want to find out how many of these hospitals have been visited by more than 1,000 people under the age of 15. What you do now is you say count if. So count if something is here, I just want to count those. I don't want to count those where it doesn't apply. So in this case, I'm saying, and you see what you see just underneath the cell there. It says count if range criteria. I assume for your guys that will say range and criteria in Catalan, in Spanish. So it will always, again for me this pop-up box is in English. I assume for you guys it's in Catalan or Spanish. So that basically explains what you need to type and where you need to type it. So in this case, for me, range, it means where am I pulling this data from, and that is going to be this range, and then the criteria is what I'm looking for. So if I just want it to be where it is more than 1,000, and it tells me that 19 of those, there were more than 1,000 people. Let's say I change that to less than 2,000, you can see there are 14. So again, if you're just dealing with numbers and you only want to look at those of a certain value and you don't want to have to sort of sort them all one way or the other, that is the quick way to count them. And the same thing happens if you want to do a total. So again, I can say again, it tells you those three. That's 1, 2, 3. The three things that you need to put in this formula for it to know what you're doing. But let's say this time I just want the total where they're in Lleida. Is it the region? Is that Lleida? Lleida. Sorry. So this time, what I'm going to do is when this column. I've done that wrong.
Perdona, simplemente cuando está viendo para que lo sepáis, si utilizáis Google Spreadsheets, lo que le ha dicho es lo mismo que él está haciendo y os tendréis que saber las fórmulas en inglés. Si buscáis simplemente en inglés, o sea, en internet, traductor, Excel, inglés-español, hay tablas de equivalente. Normalmente la cuenta, a veces la fórmula es contar o a veces es recuento, dependiendo de la versión de Excel que tengáis, ¿vale? Como veis, una vez que mete la fórmula, el Excel te da algo parecido a lo que tú estás metiendo. Es bastante intuitivo en ese sentido. En el caso del español, por ejemplo, no es contar sí, que es lo que está haciendo él, es contar puntos sí, ¿vale? Entonces, os lo estoy diciendo para que vayáis viendo, que no os frustréis si estáis con Excel o con OpenOffice y de repente no os sale lo que le ha explicado aquí, que veáis que van cambiando las maneras de hacer, ¿no?
Okay, so yeah, and a quick thing something I've just actually realized with this data, and this is a very good tip, is in this cell, you see there's a space after the region name, and if you're just looking at that, you wouldn't have spotted that space. But if you ever do a search, if you're searching for something with that word in it, it's not going to come up because it thinks that the word in a space is different to just the word. So a quick tool that is useful there. Trim, and then the text, and it gets rid of any spaces before or after the name. So this is great for if you've got some data that you've maybe brought in off a PDF or some kind of non-structured data, so that it's not being entered by a computer, it's been entered by a person, and therefore maybe there's a space or something on either side of it, and that just gets rid of any spaces. Another just very, very quick tip. This tiny little square in the bottom right corner, if you double click, it applies that all the way down your data. So if you've got, like I say, if you want to apply one function to a whole list, you simply double click there and it pulls it all the way down.
Y en este caso, en español es mucho más sencillo el trim, que significa realmente recortar. En español lo han traducido como espacios, con lo cual es bastante intuitivo.
¿El paréntesis que se pone?
En el paréntesis, claro, can you explain? They put trim, and then what do they put in parentheses?
Yeah, so in the parentheses you put what it is you want to trim. So in this case, this cell, which is D10. So I'll just show you that again. It would be equals.
We cannot see that.
Okay, cool. Cool.
I think yeah. ¿Eso está bien o más? Can you do it more?
Yep. Yeah, no, sure.
A bit more. Bueno, ahí va. Hay algunos sitios por aquí, por la primera fila, si os queréis mover. Bueno.
So yeah, what I was doing there, and it would be the same example. For example, if there was a space also there. So I would simply click, close the brackets, and it trims it out. Again, just another very, very quick little tip. If you get something like this where things go onto 2 lines, you double click here and it spreads it all out onto a single line. So if you're short of space, that works.
Are you using a shorter? They have a longer file.
Yeah. I said this is just sorry. That file is much larger. What I'm doing here is I'm just making it smaller so it all fits on the screen. Basically, I've just taken one small bit.
Entonces no os preocupéis si lo que vosotros tenéis en vuestra pantalla es mucho más largo o grande. Él ha cogido solo un subset para enseñaros algunas fórmulas.
Yeah, I'm going to do some more stuff with the whole thing later, but this is just to show you some of the more simple functions. Another little trick that it's sometimes useful to do, when you have anything like this where there is a formula up here, it means that if you change something else somewhere else in this spreadsheet, there is a chance that what is in here will also change. So if you've already done what it is you want to do here, and you want to make sure that what is in this column doesn't change whatever else you do, you can do cut and then paste values only. I'm not sure what the Spanish equivalent of that. So cut and then. So yeah, you cut the data, but then paste it in values only. So you see up here now, it doesn't show the formula, it just shows these words. So again, this means that I can now change this to whatever, and it won't do anything to this column.
En el Excel hay varias maneras de pegar. Si pegáis con control C, control V, os mantendrá la fórmula. Si ponéis botón derecho, os dará varias opciones de pegado, y dentro de esas opciones de pegado está pegar normal, pegar con la fórmula o pegar valores. Y entonces esa es la opción que le está utilizando.
So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut the correct ones and replace the ones with spaces in. So that now these ones, except that's not worked. Hold on. Okay, so just because I'm aware that we've not got a huge amount of time, I'm going to go on to the next tool, which I think is very important. And for this one, we're going to need to import the file that we downloaded into Google Spreadsheets. I don't know if any of you have already done this, but if not, what you do is, if you're in a Google Spreadsheet already, just open a new spreadsheet. And then in File, there is a Import. Again, I'm not sure.
Importar.
Yeah. And then you simply locate the file. And then go Replace Spreadsheet and Import. And what you should end up with is something that looks a bit like this.
Esto es con la hoja de cálculo que os ha dicho que os descarguéis para que la subáis. Ahora va a hacer un ejercicio real con estos datos y vamos a sacar algunas conclusiones. ¿Alguien tiene algún problema subiendo esta hoja que os habéis descargado a Google Spreadsheets? Que levante la mano.
And you'll notice a slight difference here, because what I've done is I've translated the column headings into English just so it's easier for me to understand, and I've also, you'll see there are the narrow gaps between some of the columns, which I've removed. Again, just to show you what I'm talking about. Okay guys, so this is what you guys should have in front of you now. If anyone can let me know if you have anything different. So again, just to show you what I did to this, just to make it cleaner, to make it tidier and make it easier later on. If you control click or right click on an empty column and get rid of that, it just makes things a bit easier, because this will have come from a PDF, which is why it has these slight gaps. But the analysis we're going to do makes it a lot easier if you simply get rid of these gaps. And again, the other reason mine is different is that I translated it into English. There may be cases if you're ever dealing with data in a spreadsheet in a different language, it's very useful to use this little tool, which is equals Google Translate, and then I put, you see it says the text I want to translate, the language from and the language to. So in this case, this is the text. The language it is from is Catalan. There are 2 letter codes for these languages, which you can find quite easily online. And I want to say in English. And so there it's changed it from the Catalan into the English. So again, you don't need to do this, but it's a useful tool, and it's what I did in this case to make sure I could understand the data. So I'll go back into my translated version.
What it is that we have here?
Yeah, sure. So this is data that was given to me by someone from the Catalan health department. Is that the right description, basically, Ivana?
I think so.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Sure. And we have hospitals on the left. We have the care provider. We have the regions, and then there are various statistics in here. So the number of people who attend each one, the proportion of those who are foreign, the number of visits they made to their AP, and then various jobs at each place. If you see down the bottom here, we have different tabs. These are different sheets in the same file. So again, we've got the number of visits various doctors have made, the number of the rate of emergencies. This is sort of a classic data set that might be released by a government department. So it's the kind of thing that there will be accompanying descriptions of the data files in each case. And it may be, for example, in this case, I would sit down with the health editor, and we would discuss, just to make sure that although I know the data, he knows the context. So it would be the kind of thing you would discuss with the expert in that particular area. Again, there's a bit more data here on complaints and sort of vaccination coverage, and then things like efficiency, so the amount spent per visitor, that kind of thing.
Los datos son de la Agencia de Calidad y Evaluación de Servicios Sanitarios de Cataluña. Pondremos el enlace en la página web en Twitter de OKF en Spain, para que los podáis ver. La mayoría de los datos están en PDF, con lo cual tenéis que utilizar alguna de las técnicas de esta mañana para poder extraerlos. Creo que a lo mejor incluso habéis hecho el ejercicio con estos datos, y ahora él os va a enseñar a sacar sentido de los datos, pero están en la página web de la, no puedo decirlo en catalán porque no sé, pero bueno, Agència de Qualitat i Avaluació Sanitàries de Catalunya.
Molt bé, molt bé.
So,
Can you go for the translate, Google Translate?
yeah, sure. So again, you as you can see up here, it's equals Google Translate, and then the cell that you want to translate, then the language it is already in, and the language you want to get it into. And again, these CA and EN, these are just the Google codes for those languages. If I don't have this in front of me, but there'll be a web page which simply lists name of language and then the 2-letter code that you can look up for that. So the next thing, and this is a very, very useful tool that I'm going to look at next. In English, it is called VLOOKUP, which stands for vertical lookup. So what it is that if you've got 2 or more of these sheets, but one of the columns has the same data in, you can extract data from another sheet into this one automatically. So in this case, let's say I want to get the percentage of the figures in this column, which for you looks like this. Let's say I want to get that percentage of population assigned, and I want to take those figures, but put them into this sheet, so I can do some side-by-side comparisons. But I don't want to have to do it by copying and pasting, because maybe the hospitals in here are in a different order to what they are in here. So what I'm going to do is I go into a new column here, and I'm going to put again equals VLOOKUP. And as you can see here, the search criterion means what are you looking for in the other sheet. The array means where are you looking for it. The index means what part of that area that you're looking in do you specifically want. Again, I'll explain this better in a second. And sort order simply means, do you want to sort things lowest to highest, highest to lowest? So in this case, what am I looking for? That is this hospital. Where am I looking for it? I'm looking for it in this sheet, but in particular, I'm looking for things across these 2 columns. If for example, I wanted, say, the rate of emergencies, I would be looking in all of those columns. But because something from column C, I'm just looking at B and C. Again, the important thing, the range, it means from the first column to the one you're looking in. It doesn't mean, say, just that column and just that column. It has to be the whole range from whatever you're looking for to whatever you're trying to find. So again, because I'm looking for something in here, and I'm looking for something that matches a hospital in there, this is my range. You'll see again that the box telling me things is here. What exactly is it that I want to find? It's the thing in column C here. And so what you put here is the order of that column. Again, I'll go through this a few times because it's quite hard to get first time round. In this case, the range here is 2 columns. The value that I want to pull out is in the second column, so I put 2. And then the other thing, this is just something that Google Spreadsheets does. We don't really need to know why this is the case, but I then type false, and it simply means that it's only going to look for an exact match of the hospital name. So if something looks spelled similar to the name, it will say no, but by putting false, it means that it's only giving me an exact match. So yeah, we can now see that here, what it has done is, it has taken this name here, it has looked for this name in this sheet, it has looked in these 2 columns, it has looked in the second one, and it has pulled out this number. Again, I can simply double click here, and it will apply that to the full column. So again, this has now done that for every one of those hospitals. So yeah, I'll go through that whole process again in terms of what you're typing in. The first number is the thing, is the item in this sheet that you are also looking for in the second sheet. The second number, the second line, which is here, is where in this second sheet you want to look. The third number is which part of that range you've selected you want to look in. So I'll give you a completely different example now. If I wanted to look, just to illustrate that, if I wanted to look for, again, matching up the hospital name, but let's say this time I want prescriptions by user, so it's over here in column J. What I'm going to type is look up name of the hospital. Where am I looking for it this time? This time I'm looking at from here all the way across to J. Hold on. So that is, where am I? Come on. And B to J, there is 9 columns. So I'm looking in the 9th one here. And again, I put false in just because I want an exact match. And I've done something wrong. This is good. I get it wrong as well.
You have 2 exclamation points.
Yeah. That bit should say.
Vale, es que hay un truco y es abrir la ventana, me han dicho. ¿Alguien puede intentar abrir la ventana por ese lado?
No, hay una maneta que corría por aquí, ¿verdad?
Abrir la ventana corta el aire inmediatamente. Entonces, este es el truco.
Pero tiene que haber una maneta para abrirlo, si no, no se puede.
¿Una maneta qué?
La maneta es como... No,
Una manivela. Podéis mirar ahí, de allí. Cualquier ventana vale, ¿eh? Vale, en un rato se parará. Gracias. Sorry with the air conditioning.
No worries.
Freezing.
Yeah. So again, guys, just to show you, just so you can see what was different about that one. Again, I was looking for C3, the name of the hospital. Again, the range I'm looking across is there. That is the name of this sheet, and then it is columns B, because B has the hospital names in, all the way through to J, because J is what I'm looking for. Then because columns B, C, D, E, F, G, H, J, that is 9. That is where this 9 comes in. And again, the false we just put there anyway, just to tell it, to get us an exact match. I'll do that one more time with something different, because I can, obviously this is quite complex. Again, I'm going to look for hospital names, but this time I'm going to look in a completely different sheet here, and I'm going to look in column E, the immunization coverage of children. So what's changing here is that instead of this saying utilizatio de service, it is going to say qualitat 1. Instead of B to J, it is going to say B to E, because E is the column I'm looking in. And again, B, C, D, E is 4, so it's the 4th column. And there you see it's pulled out the 87. So again, that's one of the most difficult to first get your head around. But the 4 parts are: what am I looking for? What range of columns am I looking across? Which column exactly is the result in? And then you just put false at the end. Next thing I'll show you is how to quickly rank some data, so to list it in order. If I wanted to know which of these numbers is the highest, which is the lowest, and which are all of the ones in between, one thing you can do is, if you highlight this top row here, this is the column labels, and you press this tool here, you can filter things. So what I do now, if I wanted to sort this, I would say highest to lowest, and if you see there, it's not just changed this column, it's sorted everything there by this column, so you can see suddenly in order. But perhaps a quicker way, an easier way of getting the rank, you simply go equals rank, you choose the value you want to rank, you choose the range that you're ordering it, you're ranking it out of, and then you choose whether you want to rank it ascending or descending. So if I put 0, it tells me that that is the 16th highest number. If I put 1, it tells me that's the same as being the 4th lowest. The key, the little trick I'm going to show you here is that if I simply spread that down, you can see that obviously this doesn't make sense. Now the reason that doesn't make sense is that what I'm asking it for in here is I'm telling it to look in these cells, that's cell E2 down to E20, and automatically what Google Spreadsheets does is it assumes that every time you move down a cell, the area you're looking in moves down as well. So for example, this time you can see it's now looking down here as well. You can see in this one, it's looking way down here, and we don't want it to do that. So there's a quick fix to that. If you're ever doing something like this where the region you're looking in must stay the same no matter what cell you're in, you put this little $sign before the numbers, and it doesn't change anything yet, but when you do this, every time now you see up here it is rows 2 to 20, that every time it's looking in 2 to 20. So again, that's just if you've got a situation where you're looking in a certain vertical range, but the cell you're looking in changes each time. If you don't put those $signs in, then every time you move down a cell, it will move down the range it's looking in. Now, with the rank, that doesn't help because it's going to start looking at cells where you have no data. Just to show you again what it was like before, if there's no $sign there, then by the time I get down to this cell, you can see that is the area it's looking in, and that's no good to us. That's not what we want to do. So by putting in the $sign, it simply says whatever cell I apply this formula to, keep that range the same.
Simplemente la traducción, the translation, para lo que ha dicho John, buscar, VLOOKUP es buscar V. Tenéis que tener en cuenta también que si lo tenéis realmente en español, el Excel no funciona con comas entre todas estas funciones dentro de los paréntesis, o sea, de todas estas separadores dentro de los paréntesis, sino que es punto y coma. Y también en OpenOffice las fórmulas también en un principio suelen ir con punto y coma, y luego parece que rank es jerarquía en vez de rango, bueno, rango no sería la traducción, pero uno pensaría que podía ser, entonces es jerarquía, que sepáis que son más caracteres.
Cool. And another thing I'll just show you very quickly, and this is a relatively easy thing to do, but if you've ever got some data and you really want to highlight some values and not others, maybe you've done, this is a good sort of newsroom case study, maybe you've done some analysis and your editor comes over and he says, so what does this data show? What's the key points? Conditional formatting can be very good. So maybe what's really interesting in this column is figures where it's less than 500. So what you do is, you highlight that column, you go Format, Conditional Formatting, and then maybe you say less than 500, make it yellow. And so it instantly does that, and whatever other data in there, it will keep that rule. Anything less than 500 will go yellow. So again, this is when I've been working on stories where there's just a messy spreadsheet of loads of data, and someone comes over and says, okay, so what's interesting here? Why should this go in the tomorrow's paper? Then yeah, this is just a quick, simple way without having to type any formulas. Again, just to show you how it was done, it's format, conditional formatting, and you do that, and it will just, whatever else you've got in there, it will keep that color scheme. You can use whatever color scheme. You could change the colors of the letters instead of the background, but it's just a quick way without having to go through and make them bold or yellow yourself. It just automatically does that. Another one that I'm quickly going to show you now is the ability to transpose data, which means to flip it round. So we've got this data here, but maybe instead of having the hospital names down on the left, maybe we want to flip this round so that we can visualize it in a different way. So what you would do here is transpose. You then highlight those columns. You highlight the cells that you want to flip round, and as you can see here, it has simply changed rows into columns and columns into rows. So you now have the names of the hospitals across there. Obviously, in this case, in this particular example, we probably wouldn't have wanted to do that. But quite often, if some data is provided by your source or by a government or in a leak, and it's in the wrong arrangement, that's the simple tool. Equals, transpose, then simply highlight the text, and it will flip it round.
In Excel you can do it with
In Excel you can simply, it's one of the options, instead of like earlier we looked at pasting values only, an option in Excel is to highlight those cells and then transpose when you paste it. Now just going into the full data that I gave you earlier, so that full hospitals data, what we need to do here, I'm going to show you pivot tables, which are a great way to do sort of very quick sort of analysis of an entire data set. So if you all get this first tab, in fact let's find one that's a bit easier to work with.
En castellano es tabla dinámica, ¿ok? Entonces cuando estéis buscando es tabla dinámica.
So if everyone can go to this tab here.
Pivot, tables. Pivot, como un pivot con V, P-I-V-O-T. Tables, de tabla.
So if everyone can go to this tab here, the Qualitat una tab of the spreadsheet, and then if you take the value here and simply paste it up into A1, and then I don't know if you've done this before, but if we just go through and delete all of these empty columns from this particular tab. But what I then want to do is I want to get these providers and the regions and the UTR, all of these from the first tab. If you just copy all of those and let's bring these across. And paste into this sheet. So if everyone can just do that again, we're going to the first tab, the Datos Generales, and taking everything from these three columns and putting it into the right hand side of this Qualitat una tab. And again, that should be these headings as well. And we can now, rows 2 and 3, we can now delete these rows. So now we should have this simple, this quite familiar spreadsheet format of just column headings, row labels, and values. So that's just the classic sort of fairly straightforward cleaning steps you would do to any data that has come from, say, a PDF, just to get it into this stage where you've got no empty cells, no white spaces. Everything is either a heading, a label, or a value. So what we can do now, we can select all of this data. So select the first cell, and you then press Command A, Apple A, and you see we now have everything on here selected. We don't need Catalonia because that is the overall total. So basically, just to make sure we've all done this before we go forward, we need to have highlighted, selected all the data from cell A1 down to cell M370. Now, while we've got that selected, you press Data and then Pivot Table Report, and you see here it's automatically opened a new sheet for me here. So if everyone's at that stage now, what we can now do is I can add, say, just the regions in this first column. And let's say I want to look at the percentage of hospitalizations as the values. There's too many decimals there, of course, so let's select this whole page and go format, number, and just 2 decimals to make it easier. So again, that's a very, very quick way, without, instead of having to go through this sheet and work out averages and do this kind of thing. So instead of having to go, well, what's the average of these hospitals? What's the average of those ones? What's the average of these ones? You simply selected all of that data, dragged it across into a pivot table, and then simply by saying, I want to look at regions and I want to look at this percentage, there you have it. The key thing here, which I've not done, is you want to look at the average. So that's the average across that entire region, the average across the next region. So and the great thing here is that at the bottom, the grand total, that is the average across the entire database. So this is a very quick way of seeing which fall below average, which fall above average. Again, just to use what I was doing with the conditional formatting, maybe you want to take these cells and you want to format them so that if they're below average, so less than 5.94, maybe you want to make them yellow. So yeah, that's just a quick way of combining the two. But yeah, the key thing here is just that in this table, in all of these tables, the data is at hospital level. Each row is an individual hospital, which means that if you're looking for regions, it would, if you were doing this by hand, you'd have to go sort of doing all sorts of filtering and copying and pasting the hospitals from each region out. Whereas by putting it into a pivot table, it automatically understands that when you select these regions, that figure there is an automatic calculation of the average hospitalization rate across every hospital in that region. If instead of regions, I wanted to look at the supplier. These are all your suppliers. Again, that was the average for the number of hospitals there. One thing you can also add, let's just go back to regions for a second. Just building on something I mentioned in one of my talks yesterday about statistical significance, if say Barcelona, if there were 50 hospitals there, but in Tarragona there were only, say, 3, then it would be unfair to make any sweeping statements based on only 3 hospitals. So what you would do here is add another value, which is the hospital name, but then change that to the count, and we can quickly see there, that is the number of hospitals in each of these regions. So again, typically where you have more than 20, you can make statistically correct, statistically significant conclusions from your data. But if, for example, in fact, as you can see here, the figure for this region is quite different to the rest. Let's say this figure was a massive outlier. Let's say if you didn't have column C there, the temptation would be to say, well, look at that. That's very different to the average. Like there's a real story going on there. Sort of, why is this? And it would of course be worth investigating anyway. But by putting in that count of hospitals, you can just get an idea that there are only 8 hospitals there. So again, just based on the way statistics work, when you've got that small a sample size, the chance of an average being affected by outliers is very much increased. Whereas when you've got 216 hospitals, if you think about just plotting all of these figures on a bar chart, when you've got 216, the average is much more reliable. So again, this is just including that count when you're looking at averages is always a very useful step, just to make sure that you're not jumping to the wrong conclusions. Yeah, cool. Okay, very quickly, just a couple of quick tips. One thing I would always do is, whenever I've been working on a sheet like this and I've got lots of formulas going on, lots of different data, I've been manipulating things, I've got lots of things where if I change one cell, the whole lot will change. What is actually often worth doing is, as soon as you've uploaded this file, as soon as you've imported it into Google Spreadsheets, just duplicate each of these sheets so you can have the original file, and you can then have whatever you want to call this, so I'll say like working data, and so you can make sure that if you spend maybe an hour of doing analysis on this sheet, and then you're no longer at a stage where you can just press undo and go back to how it was, it's always worth just having this the old example where you know this is exactly as the data came to you, because it's, however much we try, it's quite, when you're doing this amount of stuff on data, you can quite often actually end up, during the analysis you can maybe change something and you haven't realized it at the time. But it's always worth being able, when you've got to this stage, you've done your analysis and you're about to run the story, just make sure by going back to this original copy that is in its hard format, values only, and hasn't been changed, just make sure that nothing has changed in terms of the raw data from that. Yeah, a very quick, cool little tip to show you is the ability to import data directly from a web page if it's in the right format. Okay, that's cool then. Yeah. Yeah.
Estabais todos en el taller de Michael, ¿no?
Yeah.
Importar de una página web, ¿no?
Cool. In that case, yeah, I think that pretty much takes care.
¿Tenéis alguna pregunta? Hay tiempo para una pregunta. Que nos queremos ir a comer.
Pues, are this data available on the internet?
Yeah,
Sí.
this data, this was given to me, this was just emailed to me, the link to that file. I can show you.
Pondremos ahora, después de comer, el enlace a los datos de manera original y a dónde están los datos, todos los datos de la agencia, que normalmente están en PDF, pero sí están online.
Pero están así, o están en PDF.
Están en PDF, pero él al principio del taller, no sé si estabas, ha dado un enlace en el que ya ha sacado el Excel y está descargable, con lo cual si no te lo has apuntado, acércate luego después y te lo apuntas, ¿vale? O sea, pero originalmente están en PDF. You extracted it from a PDF, right?
I didn't personally, but the file that was available to download from the website has been.
Ah, okay, so
yeah.
you did download it from Excel then? The Excel file?
Yeah.
Entonces, en la web normalmente está todo en PDF, pero hay un archivo de Excel, entonces él ha trabajado con ese archivo de Excel, directamente descargable de la página web, sí. A ver, pondremos el enlace, o te lo doy ahora si quieres, pero lo pondremos en Twitter, en OKF en Spain, le pondremos en Twitter después de comer, ¿vale? ¿Alguna pregunta más? Ok, well, vamos a darle las gracias a John.